Pain in my heart. In Welcome to Integral Review number 9. Today we're going to talk about Corona, capitalism, and neoliberalism. So first off, how are you, David? It's been a while since last time we talked.
Yeah, man, we don't get to hang out enough. We need to do more podcasts so we can hang out more. I'm doing good, just staying busy, doing lots of editing.
So originally we wanted to do the book review from Annika Harris, Consciousness. So basically, what is consciousness? The book is Conscious Fundamental Mind of Mystery or something like that. But this Corona thing came up, which is one of the biggest events in recent history. So we kind of decided that we're gonna move that podcast to another episode and we're gonna talk about Corona in today's political and global situation.
For all you people out there quarantined at home, wanting to know what to think about some of this Corona stuff from a more integral perspective, Aljosa and I are here to talk with you about it a little bit.
So if you think about it, obviously the Corona is actually not the only problem we have. Obviously at this moment it's the biggest one, but just the last few years, like 2018, 2019, and even in 2020, just the first 3 months, there are many things that already went kind of haywire. So there's a communal riots in New Delhi in India. So you have locust swarm in East Africa. If we almost had like a third world war between US and Iran when Trump killed the general. We have migration issues in Europe. Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter accident. We have Australian wildfires, and now we have recent earthquake in Zagreb, which was close to my country. Now we have coronavirus and economic meltdown. So when you think about how this year started, I mean, it's so fascinating how many huge events. How do you feel the new year started?
Yeah, I mean, I was really excited. I was personally thinking, oh man, this year is going to be great. I'm going to finally get my business up and going, and things are going to be going really well. I was like going into it feeling like, all right, this is my year. I mean, I am an introvert, so this might still very well be my year. We'll have to see how it pans out. On the other side of some of this stuff, it might have a silver lining or something. I have sort of mixed feelings at the moment. I'm not sure if I would have put Kobe Bryant in that previous list.
Kobe!
We're not saying they're all equal, I guess, right? They're just things that are happening in the zeitgeist.
Kobe obviously is not like a huge natural disaster, but it's still, I was kind of trying to say that, I mean, still his daughter died, 9 people died, and he was one of the most famous basketball player in recent. I was just kind of emphasizing how bad 2020 already started before we got to Corona problem. I do think that probably Corona hasn't hit you yet, because in your city it seems like it's still okay. But I think if eventually US gets to the lockdown, I think you're gonna probably feel the consequences a lot more than during this podcast that we have right now. And maybe next month you're gonna be a totally different person.
Right, yeah.
That you are
I'll
now.
just come out of my cave like a long beard, like Corona, shaking my fist at the sky, squinty-eyed. Yeah, hopefully it doesn't totally destroy me and my sanity. Yeah, it doesn't really seem like it is fully hit here. It still feels like early days. Although most of the people's jobs are closed down, most of the restaurants are closed. Some people are still doing to-go orders and things like that. Grocery stores are rationing things. That's good. They're telling people you can only buy, one of these or 2 of those or something. And there are confirmed cases in my city, I guess.
There are confirmed cases, then yeah, eventually it's gonna probably, a lot of things gonna shut down. Because so for instance, I'm from Slovenia, and Italy is one of the biggest, if now in this moment probably already the biggest coronavirus hit. And then you also have Spain, Germany, obviously the US is gonna get hit a lot as well. And for me, last week, life changed. I can either only go to the store or I can go out running, and that's pretty much it. No socializing, nothing. Obviously you can kind of break the rule if you want, but I wanna be part of the solution and stay home and isolate. But yeah, our country is hit a lot because Italy is next to us and Italy is in a horrible situation. And Corona is already destroying lives around the world. There's no weddings, funerals are overbooked, jobs are being lost. So a lot of people who got used to some sort of lifestyle totally need to change it. Some people say it's like a paradise for introverts. So for me, it's not such a big hit, but for somebody who maybe is a more outdoor extrovert, that person might feel a bit more depressed, I guess. One of the interesting things is, so basically Corona kind of started in Wuhan, which is in China. But then China kind of managed to stop the spreading. But from there, I think that happened somewhere in November. It went all over the world because obviously we live in a globalized society where one thing can immediately spread around the world because everyone can go anywhere. And now it's kind of hit the whole planet and we have this huge economic meltdown. People are panicking. Toilet paper rolls are disappearing from the store shelves. Did you notice that or not yet in your city?
Oh yeah, definitely where I live, there is no toilet paper at any of the stores. Sometimes if you get in like early in the morning, you can get a certain amount of toilet paper, but they only let you buy so much and it's gone like immediately. So
well, it's kind of funny when people kind of buy toilet paper instead of food. If you're ready for some kind of nuclear meltdown, you might need food more than toilet paper.
Yeah, I don't get the toilet paper thing really. I mean, do we poop now more than before, or like what's going on? Like
there are like videos, people literally fighting over it, like Jesus Christ.
Listen, you think you need me, but you don't. Please, leave me alone.
But coronavirus.
You're not listening to me. I am toilet paper. You need medicine, gloves, food.
And toilet paper.
No,
paper for my butt. Oh yeah.
Are you dumb?
Yes.
So many people have already said this. It's a crazy commodity. I think one interesting thing about that is that a lot of places in the world don't really use toilet paper as much as America does. This idea of wiping your butt with this paper as like being good enough is considered pretty gross to some people in other places. Have you tried these kinds of toilet, Aljosa?
This is more like a Western thing, I think. So Europe and America are probably, because here in our country, in Europe in general, also toilet paper disappears. So I think it's probably the same thing.
We're both savages in this regard.
Yeah. And also I found, so this is the curse of YouTube algorithm. But there was a TED talk in 2015 by Bill Gates, right? And basically the talk is how we are not prepared for the next pandemic.
When I was a kid, the disaster we worried about most was a nuclear war. That's why we had a barrel like this down in our basement filled with cans of food and water. When the nuclear attack came, we were supposed to go downstairs, hunker down, and eat out of that barrel. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes. We're not ready for the next epidemic.
Guess what? Bill Gates was right. World was not ready. And it's kind of interesting because if there's anything, and this is something that Sam Harris said, but if there was anything that was guaranteed to happen, it was probably some kind of epidemic or pandemic, right? It was probably even before some kind of World War III or some kind of comet. And yet the whole world, even though Bill Gates said in 2015 TED Talk that we are not ready, well, guess what? We're not ready. And I think this is also kind of raising new questions about our free market capitalism and neoliberalism and show some of the flaws which we're gonna get into. And I think just based on the comment sections when you made that comment about free healthcare, it's always astonishing to me how brainwashed United States really is around these issues. And I'm afraid that United States can become new Italy because of their kind of neoliberal free market private insurance. And I think this coronavirus is gonna bring up all the flaws of this neoliberal capitalistic system. What's your opinion on this?
The whole system is already operating on such a shoestring. So many people are already living on like such a knife's edge. They're so close to complete failure as it is anyways, living week to week and barely making it. It's interesting because now that the economy is shut down, basically all these people who were right on the border of being totally screwed are now all totally screwed and all at once. So this is really capitalism game over. Unless, I mean, like, no, it is really capitalism game over. At least temporarily. At least there's a pause on capitalism. And there's gonna have to be some form of giant social safety net to take care of everybody, or you're gonna literally see riots in the streets and martial law and needy people at each other's doors and robbing and killing and stealing, and it's gonna be a complete show if they don't figure out how to take care of people. I think it's interesting, one of the only politicians that has really been that interesting to me lately is the Yang guy, the Yang gang, his idea of universal basic income. Maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but like this is the kind of thing that really seems appropriate and on point right now. I mean, we thought it was going to be because of automation, but the point is that if a bunch of people go out of a job or lose their income, it can basically destroy the system. And it's like not even a matter of like, oh, is it handouts to the lazy? In certain situations, you just literally have to take care of these people or the whole system will collapse.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that this will kind of show how weak neoliberal capitalistic system really is when something happens. There are basically two assumptions, right? That more or less things will be okay. So there's nothing major gonna happen, so the free market can kind of work. And the second is that the whole economy, just in general, has a premise that there's gonna be infinite resources on the planet. So you need those two things to have any kind of cyclical economy going. So you need unlimited resources, which we don't have, obviously. And then we already have a presupposition that nothing majorly is gonna go wrong. And if you lose resources, that's a major event going wrong. And now obviously something went wrong even before that, but this is kind of where free market is not gonna save anything, right? This is where government needs to step in. So it's kind of interesting because the whole idea of neoliberalism is the idea that you should have as least government intervention as possible and let the markets be free, and then you have like selfish rational beings who freely choose to be in the free market and everybody's better off. So this is such a pathetic, superficial view of how reality works, how humans work. It just surprises me how brainwashed, especially in America, especially on your comments that I saw in your comment section that we were saying when you were talking about free health. The amount of brainwashing people have is just absurd to me. Even here in Europe, if you look at capitalism here, so obviously there are many kind of strains of capitalism. So you have the extreme neoliberal in the United States. So you have kind of socialistic capitalistic here in Slovenia. Then you have kind of oligarchy capitalism in Russia. Then you have communistic capitalism in China and Scandinavian capitalism in Scandinavia. And one big difference is that in America, it's a lot more hyper individualistic versus our country. And this is something we already talked about in Joker to some extent, because America is all about, no, you're free, just work for it. Government doesn't owe you anything. And every time you say you need government's help, they're gonna just say, oh no, that's communism, that's gonna get to the Holocaust, the Gulag. The amount of brainwashing is just absurd. How do you feel about when you say, let's have a free healthcare? And people go, well, government's gonna ruin everything, and just have this plain stupid assumption. They don't go into any details. It's just pure fact that government is bad 100% of the time. That's it. There's no other arguments. How can you have such a pathetically stupid argument like that? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. First of all, I want to say that often the loudest people can be in the minority. There might be a bunch of comments, but it's only from a handful of people who vehemently disagree. Yeah, there was a bunch of comments, and it was a lot of arguing from the people who disagreed, but there were also well over 100 likes. I would say you don't see a lot of the positive comments on there, but there was a lot. The other thing I want to say is my mom works for the government. She's in the environmental department, and she tells me about the bureaucracy in the government. It is infuriating. So when these people are like, oh, we need less government, the government is corrupt and ineffective, I'm like, yeah, you're right. The government is corrupt and ineffective. But the problem with these conservative people who talk about things like this, they talk about it like it's only one way and it can never be better. You can fix a healthcare system that exists for people. You can't fix and improve something that doesn't exist. So that's one thing that they just don't seem to get. Like, not having something isn't better than having something that's not perfect. So they make like the perfect the enemy of the good. But I do understand their criticisms about government and bureaucracy, but they don't seem to understand, like, especially the people who are like way more into this neoliberalism, like you're talking about, is that some problems can not be solved by the free market and can only be solved through larger systems and governments like making standards. And honestly, even those larger problems cannot be solved by local government. And when I say local government, I mean national government. We need to have worldwide standards to be able to deal with some of these big problems like coronavirus or pollution, environmental crisis. I'm not saying it needs to be a worldwide government or something like that, but we do need some kind of worldwide standards for these big picture topics that affect everyone. Yeah, definitely. More and more, we need to get to the point where we're realizing that we're all connected and that we really can't continue to believe that the free market actually works. The free market failed during the Great Depression. It's going to fail again right now. And after we learned that lesson the first time, we put into place these social safety nets and we created the New Deal, because pure extreme liberalism and the free market doesn't work. We've all played Monopoly. We know that game ends. So the only way to keep the game kind of going is to sneak money to the poor people under the table so that way they'll keep playing. So the only way to get you to keep going around is to like make sure that you have enough so that way you don't fail. But now now everybody's about to fail. What that means is that we're going to have to expand our social safety nets, at least temporarily, if not ongoing into the future. See, the problem is once you give us something like this, we know that we can have it and we want to keep it too. It's an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, I just want to kind of, when you go back to the government, right? And I agree, obviously all those concerns they have are true. There's a lot of bureaucracy and so on. But the problem is that when we talk about either a government or, let's say, some free market private firm, both of them are just sets of people, right? Sure, maybe private company has more freedom to maneuver than government would. At the end of the day, it's not a question of what's better, a government or a private company. The question is who's in charge. The problem is government can be better. You can just make some vague statement. Well, government always equals bad and, private companies, free market always equals good. There's no black and white here. It depends which people, when, why, how. You can make some general stupid statements that a lot of those people made. People don't understand. We're not talking about government per se. We're talking about people in charge of the government, right? Just like you have a bad government people, just like you have bad CEOs. You have good government people, just like you have good CEOs. So whether there's a private company or government is actually beside the point in this situation.
Yeah, and if you can upgrade the decision-making process, then you can upgrade the way the government works. But the way that they talk about it as if government is just bad or ineffective, period. And it's like, that is a totally stagnant and backwards view. Like, it's a form of extreme conservatism to the point where it's like, we want to live in the Wild West. We want to live in a time when there's no government. It's like, you know what? I'm sorry, that's just not the world we live in. You might want to live in ancient Egypt, but you don't. So, sorry, you have to deal with the world as it is now. And we need governments now more than ever because we have these huge problems that, frankly, the market cannot and will not solve.
Another interesting thing is that Trump was trying to buy a German vaccine company. This news came out a few days ago that the America First approach again. So this is the American egocentrism. Oh, we're the first, we're the best, right?
Well, we are.
God bless America.
Yeah, of course. Again, this stupid neoliberal America is treating the whole world as free market. I'm just gonna go to some random German company and, hey, we'll give you like $1 trillion or whatever, just make a vaccine for America first, wink wink, right? Obviously, German government's gonna strike back and be like, hey, what the we're all in this together. You can just buy our company. And the amount of selfishness that obviously Trump showed in this situation is just horrifying.
It's disgusting.
It's disgusting because we as a whole world are in it together. We will eventually need some kind of a worldly government or worldly organization when something like that goes down that can come in and save us, because again, free market is not going to save us this situation. There are just some things that free market cannot solve. And again, this is just one of them, but there are going to be more and more others as well. But it is kind of interesting that anti-vaxxers are now a bit more quiet, and also liberals and neoliberalists, because now it's kind of funny for America, especially because America is all about, less and less. Obviously, government was always interventing. There's no such thing as free market, and there never was, because if market was truly free, it would eat itself like in few seconds. Amazon would just buy everything and that's it. End of free market. Obviously, there's this tendency, government should stay away, right? And this is the situation where America is now in a kind of interesting position, because they're all like, oh yeah, down with socialism, government shouldn't be involved, but now government will need to get involved big time. Let me say it better. Government will need to be involved bigly if they wanna help America. I think America is kind of interesting situation here, because now they're gonna see how bad their system of private insurance is. And when you say it about bureaucracy, right? So there's a book called Useless Jobs. I forgot the author. Anybody can Google it. I think one of the useless jobs was, he mentioned that there's a lot of private insurance firms and they have people there just to make sure there's a lot bureaucracy that the person needs to sign. And the more bureaucracy he needs to sign, the more money the insurance company can take. So even in private insurance company, there are a lot of jobs just to take profit by making more bureaucracy and using that to make more profit. So this idea that this only applies to government is false again.
What you said about the government needing to step up, it's kind of going to go one way or another. It's either they're going to step up and do the right thing and take care of people and figure out some like really skillful solution, or they're going to need to step up and assert themselves through like martial law, because there's going to be riots in the street. And maybe a little bit of both, to be honest. But I really hope that they step up and take care of people, because if they don't, it really is going to get bad. And it's going to be scary out there.
Riots, that's the last thing they want to afford right now, because if you have riots, you have basically a guaranteed massive spreading immediately. exactly, right?
Sure.
So government is definitely in an interesting situation. I don't think they're gonna have a lot of choice, right? They either take care of it, whatever they need to do to make sure they survive. If you come to riots in the time of pandemic, then you're guaranteed to have a total collapse, because then the hospitals will be overrun. There are gonna be way too many people. America doesn't have enough respiratory machines. They don't have enough hospital beds. So we have all the statistics. There's not enough. And if they don't stay at home and social distance, they go out and riot, America's done. And this is extremely dangerous and serious situation. And
or even if they don't riot, if everybody starts turning to crime, breaking into people's houses and holding people up at gunpoint and stuff, I could see this kind of stuff happening. Desperate people doing desperate things in desperate time to try to live.
Basically, we can have a situation where a lot of people can become jokers. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, basically.
It's kind of interesting. Again, if we go back to the Joker, like you said, there's a lot of people who are on edge, especially in America, between being a Joker and not being a Joker, right? And if there's just one more thing like Corona that can tip that edge, yeah, you can have massive shootings. I mean, a lot of people have guns in America. If they start to lose faith in government, who knows what can happen, right? So here is going to be super important for Trump and his administration to calm people down. And this is, I think, one of the weird things that's going to happen. But the neoliberal capitalistic America will now force to become socialistic.
Primary seems bleak. Everyone's voting for the guy who's gone eerily silent except to use the moment to blast Trump while his opponent no one is voting for is raising money for relief. And meanwhile, Trump is getting behind all kinds of measures that voters will likely praise. He's suspending evictions and talking about what is essentially universal basic income. And they have this whole relief package offering paid sick leave and free healthcare and unemployment benefits. And while they aren't good enough, most people won't notice. So you can't help but to laugh and cry at the same time watching the GOP seemingly adapt all the stuff Bernie Sanders has been talking about his whole life for this one pandemic emergency, and how by doing that, they might actually get Trump reelected. And that's depressing. Strange that when the country hit a crisis, those same people immediately adopted ideas they were calling socialist a month earlier because they knew it would actually help. So strange. This brief moment in which America dabbles with socialism, when airlines are like, actually, you can bring more liquid on the plane. It's not a big deal. And jails are like, well, actually, we can just let non-violent offenders out. That's just a thing we could always do. In this terrible pandemic, made worse by racism and an administration that was horribly unprepared, maybe the good that will come is that average Americans will realize that all these rules put in place and designed to keep the disenfranchised down, they were all completely arbitrary to begin with. And the only reason the powerful weren't allowing us access to a universal basic income or free healthcare or any of these things progressives talk about, it wasn't because it was logistically impossible, but rather just something they didn't want to do. And now that the cat is out of the bag, maybe it won't matter who wins the next election. Maybe historians will see this as the catalyst to a growing political change in the country.
It will be interesting to see how this will pan out and what can America and the whole world learn from our systems. Because if we look at something like South Korea and especially China, right? So China was the main source of Corona and they got it under control. Obviously, they have the luxury of more totalitarian approach.
Right.
But I think China is a good example of how, and I'm not saying that China has the most competent government in the world. There are many
Socialist, you communist.
This is what people
Alyosha's advocating for that we should all be like in China, but
Exactly.
that's where you're going with this?
Yeah, and this is gonna lead to inevitable gulags. Everybody is gonna be in the concentration camp.
Death
There's
camps.
gonna be 200 million people. That's all I educate.
Everyone's gonna get brainwashed. You're gonna be treated like just another number in the system. How could you do this to us, Alyosha?
This is the way to go. Numbers don't numbers don't lie. No, but what I'm gonna emphasize is that yeah, sure, there's a lot of problem with the Chinese system. Obviously, there's a lot of inhuman things going on there, but at least they have a strong government that can stop the spreading, right?
Right.
So America kind of pronounced that it's in a state of emergency, and you still had like right-wing people going to Disneyland, not taking it seriously. You even still have like college people. So David Beckman kind of showed a few clips, and they're like college people having their spring break, right? And journalist says them, why aren't you inside?
The libertarians are being pretty damn quiet. Most people by and large understand that the government does have a pretty significant role to play here. And one of the places where the government has a role to play, and quickly, is the beaches of Florida. Tons of spring breakers have just been continuing to to party.
I get corona. At the end of the day, I'm not going to let it stop me from partying. You know, we've been waiting for Miami spring break for a while. About 2 months we've had the strip playing. 2-3 months. So we're just out here having a good time. Whatever happens, happens.
Like, it's really messing up with my spring break. What is there to do here other than go to the bars or the beach, and they're closing all of it? It's really messing up. I think they're blowing it way out of proportion. I think it's doing way too much.
Doing us bad. We need a refund. This virus ain't that serious. It's more serious things out there like hunger and poverty, and we need to address that.
Okay, I don't care. You know, I'm young. Corona's not gonna kill me. I need to live my life to the fullest and stuff like that. So a lot of people even don't take it seriously, even at this point probably, right? Because again, I think America is not used to such a total government domination.
Well, also Americans are badass and we have tons of confidence in ourselves. We're not afraid of coronavirus, whatever.
We're just gonna shoot it with a shotgun or something, right?
Yeah,
America,
like
hell yeah.
I ain't afraid of no critter. I'm gonna put your head on the wall, coronavirus. Take that, you gall-darn varmint.
Hell, America, hell yeah, exactly. Maybe I got a little bit of my American DNA flowing through my blood. I've heard some mixed things about it. I've heard from some people that a good amount of the people who get it won't even necessarily affect them that much. I've heard that 60% of people, it's going to be really mild. 40% of people, it's going to be pretty bad. You know, like kind of bad. Like 20%, you might have to be hospitalized. Like I said, there's a bunch of information. I'm not saying that I know what the correct information is or anything like that about it. I've heard from some people that it's going to be rough. It's rough on everyone. And then I've heard from some people that it's like, nah, it's not really that big of a deal. I don't really know how I feel about that.
The problem, let me kind of enlighten you, if I may.
Enlighten me, please do.
Yeah, so the disease by itself doesn't seem to be, it's not like deadly, it's not like Spanish flu. It's not the severeness of the virus, it's the how many people get it. Let's say everybody at this point gets a common cold, right? So you're gonna have a certain amount of people that this common cold can get critical, right? And if everybody has it at the same time, there's gonna be a certain percent of people that will need serious help, and that would immediately overwhelm the hospitals and everything. The problem is not the virus itself, it's the overwhelming of too many people having virus at the same time. That's the problem. Sure, if you get a virus, you're gonna be 14 days, you know, drink some tea. Most people, if you're young, yeah, statistically, most likely you're gonna be fine. If 100% of America has it, and let's say maybe 10% would need to go to the hospital, you know how many people that is? There's no way that there's gonna be enough. So the problem is not so much the virus and its severity as much as it is that it can easily overwhelm the healthcare system. And this is what's happening in Italy. So many people have this virus now. You know, there's like hundreds of people dying every day. Even the funeral company, you have people being at home lying dead for like 2 days because it's overwhelmed. Too many coffins, too many funerals. And this is the main problem. It's not so much the severity, especially if you're young, but it's if there's too many, just like it would be with common cold. This is why we talk about flattening the curve, because we need to flatten the curve in order for our healthcare system not to be overpacked. Because if this goes down, then you're gonna see people lying on the streets dying. You're gonna have old people outside hospitals on the streets dying. Doctors will need to make decisions who dies, who doesn't. Again, this is gonna be more about older people, but still, it can be horrible.
And we think that if we flatten the curve for long enough, then we'll be able to come up with a vaccine in time to be able to put a stop to it and like get a hold on it. Is that the idea?
The idea is to flatten the curve, which means obviously the disease is gonna spread. We don't know how many people will get, but the idea is that it spreads as slowly as possible to as least people as possible, so we don't overwhelm any healthcare system. If Italy screwed up, now they're paying huge prices. There's army men outside looking and protecting the streets to make sure you're not outside unless you really need to be. I hope that US is not gonna get to that, and I hope people listening to this podcast will take this extremely seriously, because it's super serious. If you don't believe me, just check the news on Italy and you'll see how serious it is.
My question is, what's the end goal? What do we think the solution is, and when do we think we're going to have it contained or have control of it? Like, what are we thinking is
I heard this one is almost impossible to tell. Some people think, oh, it's just going to be 2-week thing. It's not going to be a 2-week thing. Some people say half a year. Some people say 1 year. Some people say 50%. I mean, it's fine if there's 50% of people getting it, as long as we don't have the high curve, right? If we do it slowly, that's fine, right? But the problem is we don't know. But just my speculation, and I'm by no means epidemiology expert, but I think this is probably going to haunt us at least till the end of the year. This is my speculation. So vaccine, it takes a year and a half. So there are people who are expecting it to be like middle of 2021. But until then, I think some extreme socialistic measures like social distancing and all the things that will need to happen will apply. So we are talking about maybe half a year. That's my speculation based on the news and experts I heard of. So
here's a question I have for you, Aljosha. From a big picture perspective, when I think about this thing in a utilitarian kind of way, question that I have is, and maybe you can help explain this to me and clear up my confusion around this. My question is like, okay, so let's say that it kills like 1% of the population. That's a huge amount of people. That affects everybody. I'm not at all implying that that's not a big deal or that's not something serious or that that's not something that we should all be very concerned about and taking very seriously. But my other concern is, okay, so we shut down everything. Now all these businesses are closing. Now we're not just talking about affecting 1% of the population. We're talking about seriously affecting the livelihoods of almost everybody. Now it's not just a crisis for these 1% of people, it's a crisis for everyone. You know what I mean? Why would we want to, if everybody freaks out and the whole system collapses and you have all these desperate people everywhere, you're talking like some like worse than a flu pandemic. Now you're talking about like the whole world eating itself. You know what I mean? Like that's way worse than 1% of the population dying. Like that in itself could lead to lots and lots and lots of people dying. So I'm wondering, would it be better to, like hypothetically, to just go about business as usual? Some people are going to get it, some people are not. Yeah, okay, the health system's going to be overwhelmed, but the economic system won't collapse. I mean, what I'm saying kind of is coming from a perspective that is not taking into account the possibility of the system being like, okay, well, you know what, we'll be socialists, we'll just take care of everybody. I'm kind of skeptical whether the government will actually be able to pull that one off or not, to really be able to help everybody. If they do, that's great, but if they don't, it could be really bad. I'm wondering, has anyone in the world, any systems in the world, even considered not doing anything about it and dealing with the consequences of it head on? Is that potentially a better solution? Why or why not?
You think we shouldn't do anything, just live life as business as usual?
I'm not saying that's what I think that we should do. I'm wondering if people have considered this as a possibility and why or why not.
Let's just say nothing changes, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to immediately overwhelm the healthcare system, because now you're going to have thousands upon thousands of people, especially older people who need critical help. They will not get because there's not enough of beds, hospital beds, respiratory devices. So this is kind of like the Darwinistic natural selection thing. Basically making that decision is saying, well, let the virus kill all the people who can't handle it. Almost like a gene wipe, if you will. Because this is what would happen, right? If you just go business as usual, then you're basically forcing doctors to make decision who to plug and who to unplug. Because you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be in critical condition, and you're just going to do like a people wipe in a way.
Right. Lots of people are going to die.
Yeah.
In terms of the cost benefit analysis, it's going to suck. Assuming that those are the two possibilities, like I would say there's definitely other possibilities, right? But are there other reasons? Okay, maybe somebody would argue that the economy is going to be trashed anyways. Even trying to do this, even having this situation, no matter what, it's going to trash the economy. Maybe that's an argument someone would make. I'm not saying that I understand the situation enough to fully make that argument, but I was wondering if you've heard anybody even say this, or if anybody's even argued about this stuff.
I watch a lot of news and nobody, I talked among my friends about this issue, but in the mainstream news, I'm sure there probably is. I don't watch a lot of mainstream news. I just watch The Guardian and some YouTubers, obviously, but nobody even thought about that. What you're saying now, a lot of people will probably equate that with Stalinism or Hitlerism or something like that.
The difference is with those people, they like specifically intentionally tried to target particular people. What I'm talking about is like, okay, if you go down this road, you could potentially save the lives of a good amount of people, but if you go down this road, you might seem like you're going to save the lives of a bunch of people, but maybe it's not as many. And you have to be like, well, which is worse? Is it worse if like 1% of your population dies and you have major problems with that? Or is it worse if you have like complete failure of the system? Then way more people could die, including a good amount of the 1% still. And just in terms of cost-benefit analysis, I've wondered this. I do think that economic system might be screwed either way. It still might get to the point where it has an impact. Nobody wants to go out anymore or something like this.
Even before Corona, a lot of people kind of expected the system to collapse because there's like this tension building up, and obviously this system is not made to last. It has its own business cycles, and so it's expected the system to collapse. I think Corona just kind of,
exposed the weak point.
Exposed the weak point and just fast forwarded the process a bit.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about what would happen if you go your route, but...
Well, don't call call it my route. I
mean,
I don't know if I stand by
maybe-
it or not. I'm
yeah,
just
maybe that's
curious
not-
about it.
I'm putting you in a corner, but I'm gonna say this: if most experts, like the World Health Organization, I assume they probably did these calculations in their internal offices, right?
I hope so.
And if they came to the conclusion that social distancing is the answer, I'm sure they realized that the other answer was probably a lot worse in the long term.
Right.
So I'll just trust their opinion here, because I don't know, to be honest.
I would imagine that the capitalists of the world, we've seen keep the machines running no matter what is kind of their philosophy, right? The show must go on. Like, if they got to the point where we have Trump in office and like majority Republican rule and stuff like this, and they're like, okay, we need to shut it down, we need to do social distancing. It seems like somebody somewhere made like a really good pitch as to why this has to be the way and that we definitely can't keep things up and going. I was kind of hoping maybe you could make that argument because I don't know how to make it personally, but I bet that happened. I'm sure that's the case. What do you think?
The problem, I think, with both of us is that none of us are expert epidemiologists. So it's for us probably extremely hard to calculate. So I'll just take their word.
You know what? Let's do some research on that and check the links in the description. We will see if we can find somebody who's explaining this and we will put it in the
I'm sure there are probably YouTube videos that people can find if they just search in and see. Somebody had to do the calculation, right? World Health Organization, you have, millions of experts talking together. I'm sure they probably did the calculation and realized that social distancing is a lot better version than just keep the machine going. So I'll just take their word for it. That's sort of my answer here. Although I'm sure they probably don't maybe even know either, because there are so many factors here and it's so hard to calculate all those things that go wrong, right? Your route immediately guarantees
Quit calling it
destruction.
my route.
Or your
It's not
idea.
the David Doomsday plan.
Or your proposed
here.
or your semi-proposed idea, you're guaranteed to shut down the healthcare
How about
system.
we call it capitalist plan A?
Capitalist plan A is that there's a lot of rich people going to their private islands. This is their plan.
Like Atlas Shrugged.
I heard Zizek talk about some of his friends told him that a lot of rich people went to their islands and they're gonna be there for like half a year or whatever. It's almost like a movie in a way when rich people, get away in their private jets. I heard
They're
private
like, I
jet
have my
market is,
money.
like soaring and stuff like that.
They're like, let them loot my mansion. My
Yeah.
insurance will cover it.
Exactly. And this is what kind of capitalism does, I guess. It's almost like a movie in a way.
Let them eat themselves.
Yeah,
They'll
let them
destroy
eat
their own
themselves.
cities.
Let
Yeah.
us be in our private island for a while. Obviously, they're
Yeah.
not going to be able to be there forever, but I mean, if they have like half a year preparation, I'm sure they'll come
Even
back with their
private islands
jets.
have servants, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's
Can't
kind of
escape
interesting,
us.
yeah.
You can't escape us.
So another
you
thing-
bourgeois mother. The proletariat will rise. Sorry.
So another interesting thing is that so obviously I cannot answer your question, and
Okay.
I think we both just need to kind of accept the fact that we probably won't be able to answer that question and just trust that people who are experts in this field did their calculations and this is the solutions. I think this is the best we can do, probably. You agree?
I don't know. I think for right now, it's a good plan. I think social distancing and slowing it down. And I like the idea of trying to push the government more towards a social thing. And if that actually works and we can actually pull that off and like there's this real pressure put on the government. Okay, so here's the other thing. The reason I feel like a lot of these places shut down is because there's social pressure to feel like this is the responsible thing to do. And this is why I feel like it happened on a global scale too, even with Trump and stuff like this. In terms of history, how is it going to be that you go down on the record as having responded to the event? You know what I mean? It's like a lot of PC, like image control kind of stuff, if you know what I mean. People being like, well, we're going to shut down the college or we're going to shut down the thing because it seems like the responsible thing to do. What I'm saying is historically, if you look at things from a big picture, I wonder when everybody's like, oh, we're going to do the responsible thing and shut everything down, if that destroys the whole economy. Because really, Alyosha, the thing is, we're not ready to evolve yet. I mean, like, we're ready in terms of us having the maps and the plans and stuff like that. But I mean, really, like, it's going to take like 10 years, 20 years for people to really grow into this stuff. And I will be surprised, so surprised, if America just turns around and is like, oh yeah, well, okay, we'll just give everything, take care of everybody. I really don't see that happening. I almost see this more like everything goes to shit, the whole system collapses and it eats itself. That seems, out of the two options, predictions, the more the more realistic, which is sad to say. So I wonder if this kind of naive green optimism of like, oh yeah, let's do the socially responsible thing. And then when we see that the shit has really hit the fan because the orange system collapses, now everyone's red and beige and purple and we're way down at the bottom of the spiral and we're going to kill and eat each other. So it's like maybe these kind of naive early on good intentions of like, well, we couldn't let these people die. Let's shut down everything. And then everyone dies. Like, you know, it just seems like sort of short-sighted to me a little bit.
Well, the question is, why would you conclude that everybody would die from social distancing?
Well, not everybody. And it's not from social distancing. I'm saying, I think if you have the collapse of the system on the back of social distancing and everything shutting down and now nobody can pay their bills and people are freaking out because they don't know what to do. I mean, they're not just fighting each other over toilet paper. They're fighting each other because they're freaking the out and they're scared for their kids and they want to be a good parent and they need this toilet paper.
I need it!
I don't know. I'm a little bit scared with how it's all going to play out because a lot of people I know, they thought they were like somewhat stable with their job and stuff like that. And now they're in serious trouble.
I think system would collapse either way.
I mean, eventually. I mean, maybe it would always go like this where it would be like one thing happened and then it all just spiraled out of control. Like maybe that's what the system's collapse looks like. I kind of thought it would happen over the next like 5 or 10 years more slowly and it would kind of fizzle. But I guess an event like this could really trigger it.
My kind of hope here is that you look at history, just history of change, let's say. Usually something had to go down before people change and change their behavior and their view.
Yes.
And sometimes it takes a lot of things to go down. I'm not guaranteeing that Corona is just gonna make everybody socialist or whatever the next system will be, right? Obviously capitalism and free market is gonna collapse. Even obviously it's gonna collapse now, but it's gonna probably collapse in the future because it's not sustainable based on my two premises. It has to. There's not enough resources and most of the time some big things will happen. So two main premises: once something big goes down, free market fails immediately. And we're gonna have sequence of events, and again this is one major one, and I think in time people will need to find new systems, and it doesn't have to be socialist. For all I care, it can be called something totally different here.
Sure.
For me, it's not even about the name. It's about how you sort the resources. So
See,
it's not
what
about
that means...
socialism or capitalism or communism. I don't care about the names. I care about sorting. This is my main concern here.
Yeah, it's all about how you integrate and organize and all that stuff.
Yeah, and even though free market did semi-good job
for a while, yeah.
For a while, yeah, I'm not denying free market was a brilliant idea back in the Adam Smith's days in 1700, right? But the problem is technology and people, their values evolved so much that this system is starting not to be compatible with the zeitgeist of our time. Technology is too advanced. People are a lot more, let's say, more cognitively developed. Basically, what America has is this combination of neoliberal idea, which is that people should be free as long as they obey the state laws that are equal for everybody. But states should not interfere in the free market. And there's also another thing, which is the basis that all people are rational and selfish beings, which was true at that time. And it's true at this time as well if you're, let's say, a 5 to 10 year old child.
How dare you!
But if you're like 10 or more and you still act like a selfish brat, then you probably have psychological issues. So when Adam Smith was making those theories, brilliant idea. Free market, capitalism, brilliant idea. It worked well. But now, because people are more cognitively developed or are getting more developed, these old ideas about how human nature is dying. And that's why you have people like Greta.
How dare you! How fairy tales of eternal economic growth! How dare you! For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away, look away, look away. Come here, saying that you're doing enough. How dare you? Nowhere, still nowhere in sight. Look away, look away. You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. If you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. look away.
And many others who are a lot more cognitively advanced than most neoliberals are, because being neoliberal at this point is kind of redundant. I mean, I would expect somebody being 10 years old to be neoliberal. That would be fine, maybe till 15, but more than that, questionable.
This is where I want to jump in and be like, okay, I do want to make a distinction between a red, childish, impulsive, egoic, no, me, mine, I want it now kind of a selfish person, and more wise and mature, rational thinking, like Darwinistic thinking. A lot of these people, they do nice things, but they'll tell you, oh, I do that, but I do that for me, for my own selfish reasons, because I like it when I make people feel good or something like this. A lot of people, I think, just use the semantics of selfishness, but it doesn't necessarily mean even that they're selfish. I could see some people who talk about selfishness in this kind of a way that I just mentioned, even being for free healthcare and who aren't like neoliberal and stuff like that. So to some extent, we have to be careful because, at least in my culture, these ideas are so firmly in the zeitgeist that it's almost like all of us participate in some level of resonance with parts of it. And that's because parts of it are true and good. So it can be difficult when you're brought up in these cultures. And I know Alyosha, he's also not implying that like anybody who participates in this stuff is only like they're 10 years old. But definitely some of these people who are like really trying to childishly defend whatever they want to do in a justifying it kind of way, that is the 10-year-old. And we do see that stuff a lot. It is super childish. It really isn't even like they are philosophically in line with these modern rational values. Really, they just use that stuff as like dogma or the consensus to appeal to be able to justify being assholes and doing whatever they want to do. So that is that childish, and that is the pattern that we should recognize and be very critical of.
I'm not trying to be black and white here. Obviously, you have more or less mature expression of neoliberalism. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that everybody who's a strict neolibertarian is a 10-year-old spoiled brat. I'm just saying most of them are.
I just wanted to make a couple distinctions in there so that way.
I'm not saying I'm black and white on this. I'm trying to be just for the impact sake, because if somebody really does believe this literally, sure, you can say that, well, you know, I want to do good and this is for my kind of selfish reason because I feel good. Okay, I can take that. That's fine. But that's one distinction that you could make. But there's completely another to have a whole system based on the idea that people are selfish. When I say selfish, I mean selfish versus altruistic. So I'm making this distinction. So you can be selfishly altruistic, which is what you're basically saying. So I feel good because I'm altruistic. So in that way, I'm selfish. But this is not the selfishness I'm talking about. I'm literally making distinctions between how you view another person. Is he a selfish person or altruistic? And obviously people can be both based on situation. Right? So I'm not saying human nature is purely one thing or another. I'm not saying people are just pure altruistic. Obviously people can be selfish idiots. Don't get me wrong. And we know that from history. I'm not saying...
right.
I don't have this romanticized version of human nature like Jacques Rousseau had. You know, everybody is perfectly egalitarian. But we cannot also deny the fact that system really does corrupt people. And I think that...
Of course.
Let's just look at capitalism, right? So capitalism in general does want to kind of emphasize selfishness. But even within that, people are surprisingly altruistic, even within a system that wants you to be selfish in a way. I'm just saying that to view a human being as selfish and rational, obviously people are not rational. Look at the toilet paper situation, right?
I need it!
Again, this idea that people are rational is also stupid, but let's not even go there.
Right.
But,
people who don't understand development.
Yeah.
It's like maybe some people are kind of mature and rational, but it's not the majority.
Yeah, I want to kind of point out that neoliberalism, when it was made, so obviously it's an offshoot of classical economy from Adam Smith. The idea is that when these economic theories were made, that we use today, which is neoliberal capitalism in the West, these ideas were made before psychology was even born. Sure, you had psychology with Descartes and political thinkers, but we didn't know anything about neurology. Science was in the very early stages of industrialization, so we didn't know a lot about humans back then. And the fact that we use a system that has weird basic presuppositions about what humans are, in this case selfish and rational beings, is utterly dangerous in my opinion. And I think that we need to kind of evolve and see that people are not these pure selfish robots as neoliberals try to see. And also till 1910, and this is something I commented, a lot of these economic thinkers thought that being jobless was a free choice. They didn't have cognitive capacity to realize that being jobless is also because of bad environment, because of bad health, because of bad parenting. Because the idea of parenting wasn't even the most important thing, because psychology, like I said, didn't even exist in the form that exists now. So there are a lot of factors that the original economies didn't even think about, right? And this is something that America still has a problem. American doesn't seem to be able to understand that if somebody's poor, he just thinks, oh, he's just freely choosing to be poor. And the amount, I think one of the reasons why people think like that is because of these classical ideas that people have free will, that people are selfish and rational, and it deludes America, especially America, to create more progressive, socialistic kind of systems. It's no shock that young people now have this renowned interest in communism and socialism and so on.
Yeah.
And this is the reason, because there was this neoliberal agenda that was constantly being advertised in America, and any kind of government intervention obviously means Stalinism, Hitlerism, all the bad things that happen on the East, right? And I think young people are now starting to realize neoliberalism is just a simpleton brainwashing to keep the status quo alive. And this is something I said in the comment section. So what neoliberalism does in general is the idea that whatever systemic problem a person has, capitalism is never the problem. It's always the person. For instance, Zizek said,
I don't believe, I always think that all this bullshit about, to provoke you a little bit more, this is superstitious logic. It's pure ideology. You know, this ecological bullshit, like, did you recycle that paper? Did you throw all the newspapers aside? This is to make us feel good. This is a genius of ideology in action. They translate a social problem, how to restructure our economy and so on, into personal responsibility. This is ideology at its purest. When you criticize a big company and then an idiot comes and tells you, yeah, it's easy to criticize, but what did you do? Did you put all Coke cans aside? Did you do this, that? And if you do it, it's what? It's simply, the main function is to make you feel good. You see, I did my duty towards Mother Earth. I carefully put all the cans of Coke here, all that I put there and so on. That's the main function of it. It's ideology at its purest.
The idea, if I say, oh, you know, we have a problem with ecology, and then a capitalist will show up and say, well, maybe we do, maybe we don't. What did you do? Did you sort the Coke can? So all the problems of capitalism are not capitalistic, but it's you. What are you gonna do about it? And even though on paper this sounds like a good idea, you know, you wanna make sure people take responsibility for their life, right? Maybe on paper it sounds a great idea, but there's a line between who's responsible for what at what time. And what capitalism does, it uses this extreme hyper-individualistic philosophy to blame people for their situation and not do anything about it. And again, I'm focusing on America because based on the comment sections and even how many poor people there are, homeless people in Los Angeles, nobody gives a and I hope that this tragedy of coronavirus will wake Americans up and see that you can have such a system. And if you're a neoliberalist, you are just as brainwashed as a communist would be in my book.
Exactly. And not only is it capitalism and liberalism, it's Christianity, like you're saying, is deep in our culture. And it's like the blue and orange stages are the foundation of our culture. And that's Christianity and capitalism, basically. So it's like you have a very, very individual heavy focus, the individual democracy of capitalism, the free market, and all this idea. And like you're talking about free will ideas and personal responsibility that you get in Christianity. But other integral aspects that we might want to take into account are things like types. For example, there might just be some types who might be prone to emphasize more of the individual theme. And I would say you and I probably more emphasize communal theme. What's your type? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you were just asking me between individualism and collectivism, I just agree and say collective individualism. So again,
we both agree with the synthesis here. But even then, we also, to some extent, are probably framing one within the other. That's usually what tends to happen when you synthesize from one of the perspectives. So people who are synthesizing from the more individualistic capitalist perspective, they do conscious capitalism or conscious consumerism or third way politics or something like that, the more like translation type stuff. Whereas you and I are more like, okay, we need to move way more towards the collective, towards the social stuff, and then emphasize the importance of the individual within that context to bring the individual up to their own highest potential to empower the collective, right?
Yeah, but I want to kind of go even one deeper here. And here's my kind of argument. Both neoliberalism neoliberalism and let's say extreme communism, whatever. Both are actually extremely collective ideology. The idea of collective is you just want to have people on the same page, right? So what capitalism kind of does, so there's kind of difference in between how honest the system is, right? So you can blame totalitarian system all you want, right? But at least they were honest with you. Let's say America is under Hitler for whatever reason. And let's say you, David, say to Hitler, hey, I want to have more liberal society. Hitler would say, well, maybe that's a good idea, maybe not. I don't care. We live in totalitarian regime, now go back to Gulag, right? But at least Hitler will be honest with you. In what happens in but what happens in neoliberalism, let's say Hitler is now neoliberalist and you're gonna come to him and say, hey, I think you should do this, we should do this and that, and Hitler says, sure, anything is possible, it's all on you, you can do it. So it's this false hope that you can do something while he still keeps control, you know what I mean? So he's just using the idea
and they do this thing
like
where
there.
they trot out the successful black man or something,
exactly.
And they're like, look at him, he did really good, right? That must mean that you could do it. It's like, yeah, well, he got lucky. Are you saying that he didn't work hard? It's like, no, of course he worked hard. I'm sure he worked so freaking hard. Like, he's awesome. That's not the point. The point is that statistically, people are not doing well in this situation. So one person did it doesn't mean that everybody can do it. So yeah, there's all kinds of problems like that with the system and the way that they try to prop it up with all this. But where I was going with bringing up types and stuff like this, you're talking about people who hold these liberal philosophies as if they've bought into the stuff. All I'm saying is that there's multiple factors. There's like the culture you're born in, the stage of development you're at, your personal type, and the quadrant that you emphasize in your like learning style or all these kinds of things. So you might end up with a very individualistic focused concept of justice based on your own personal experiences of injustice in your life, and you might be talking about it in these kinds of ways that make you sound neoliberal, or maybe ways that resonate with neoliberal philosophy, but they more resonate with you on a personal level. And I would say to some extent the reason that you and I even swing towards a more social direction, even though you and I are also pretty balanced, we care about other people, we care deeply. To us, we see the injustice in the world and it's super upsetting. So some people are more focused on their own personal injustices. And all I'm saying is that we all kind of come from a particular background in terms of our states and our stages and our culture and our learning style and our past experiences. And so a lot of us might resonate with these individual heavy philosophies for more personal reasons than for political reasons. People aren't actually really even that conscious or aware. Like, most people don't actually have a consistent and coherent worldview. If you ask people moral questions about, oh, what's going on in the world? What do you think about this? And you ask people these different questions, they might come down contradictory positions depending on how you ask them what kind of question. People don't really have even moral systems like someone like you or I who's like thinking, oh, like what's the depth and span utilitarian perspective on this? They just have post hoc, after the fact justifications for whatever it is they happen to do. A lot of people are just really immature. We're never taught logic. We're never really taught philosophy or the basic tools of morality or good thinking and stuff like that. So a lot of us are just kind of working with the basic zeitgeist stuff that's around, and some of it is kind of true. There's a reason that you and I, for example, include the importance of the individual themes. Like, you and I both highly value the idea of meritocracy, for example. Like, we would want a system that's going to recognize skill and greatness and people who are working hard and trying hard and doing better and bringing more to the table. Like, that individual greatness is of great value. There are definitely parts of it that make a lot of sense. You and I, given the right wording, could very well sound like we value these individual themes. We could even sound like we agree with certain neoliberal concepts given the right phrasing, don't you think?
Like I said before, I think that neoliberal, let's call it even classical liberal all the way from Adam Smith, at that time, the idea of free market capitalist economy, in my opinion, was one of the most brilliant and positive ideas ever created. So I totally give credit that free market market did super a lot. I'm not denying that capitalism did super a lot. It surpassed communism.
And you and I would also advocate for further extensions or more refined versions of something like democracy and a free market, but it wouldn't be a capitalistic market. It would be like a free marketplace of ideas. Maybe we could say that this is the true free market, right?
I'm not one of those people who just hate on capitalism or neoliberalism. I see ideas in their historical context. I know there's a good intention behind why neoliberalism rose. So let me explain what I mean by that. So the main concern of liberalism in general is the idea that usually when you have some kind of a person in charge, usually it's a state. That state usually abuses the power. So liberalism was created so that you could have people to have freedom, a revolutionary idea at that time. When you have the social contract, you're going to have a state, but state is not going to interfere as long as you obey the rules and so on. So it was a necessary and genius project to civilize society.
Yes, agreed.
And it was also a great counterbalance versus feudal systems that usually just, torture people. Within the context, neoliberalism is a genius idea, right? But I'm just saying that the zeitgeist of our time is now maybe we are now ready to have a more, excuse me for the word, a totalitarian regime, but a mature totalitarian regime. The problem is usually people only see totalitarian in terms of the past, and what neoliberalism tried to do was to save, so you're not going to have a new Hitler or Stalin, and it did a good job. Again, bravo to that. But are we mature enough? Do we have mature enough leaders where maybe we can trust them again with more totalitarian system? Now again, this is just an idea. I'm not saying I'm advocating for that, right? But I'm just saying that maybe...
The idea that Alyosha suggests here.
Yeah, so
now I'm going to do it to you now.
I had a debate with a friend. Let's say Obama was in charge of USSR instead of Stalin. But let's say Obama with the mindset of today's person, right? What would Obama do in this situation? Would he also make gulags with the moral development he has now? Obviously, it's a hard question because the zeitgeist of that time was different, right? But I doubt Obama would do what Stalin did because Stalin was a psychopath. So it's not just which system, also who's in charge. And this is, again, going back to my original problem. It's not the government or private firm. It's the question who's in charge of the private firm or who's in charge of
who's in charge and how does it run? And I mean, honestly, if you get a good how does it run, it really could be a type of democracy. Democracy not necessarily being reduced to votes, but democracy as in rule of the people. So we could have some kind of process that's divorced from the personal bias of one person. We've talked about this a little bit before, I think, but the good thing about a process versus a single person is that process-oriented type stuff you can actually refine over time and get really good decisions panned out through testing and all that, but it's more slow. So in cases of emergencies, sometimes you need a decision made now, and that's where having one person in charge to take care of that stuff is good. So that's why in America we tried to come up with this sort of best of both worlds approach, and that's why the president is in charge of the military, but we still have Congress and all this other stuff. I'm not saying that's a good system, I'm saying that's why they try to do that. But what I want to sort of pause the whole thing and say is, like, someone recently asked me something like, I want to know not just like, you guys are talking about these things and why is it an integral perspective? How is this an integral perspective on things? And how is it not just your guys' opinion, right? So look at what we've talked about so far here. We've talked about the individual and collective themes and how they relate to culture and stages of development as well as individuals, and how that can vary based on types and quadrants and stages and all these kinds of factors. And then Alyosha went in and then he put capitalism and liberalism in its historical context and talked about the pros and cons and how...
And why it was great at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how we can transcend and include the best of both themes. Exactly. And he doesn't care what you call it. He cares that it works in this kind of skillful and integrative kind of way. So this is a perspective that actually most people are not going to be able to give you because they're coming from this sort of in one box, not really understanding the bigger context, like left and right, red and blue kind of conversation. And Alyosha and I are not. We are taking into account all of these multiple factors and really trying to figure out how they all relate to each other. We want to be gracious to all these perspectives and leave openness and room for growth and for people to get it wrong a little bit but still have good intentions, but also talk about how it's really freaking important that we get some of this stuff right and we move on. So this is that integrating diversity with discernment. This is that wanting to include and see all perspectives and be sympathetic to and understanding of all perspectives, but also at the end of the day, wanting to make good decisions in the best interest of everyone. Aljosa and I have thought a lot about how to create new systems and what they would be like, and we've thought a lot about the collapse of this sort of stuff. So when we're talking about it, it's not just red team versus blue team or something like that. We really care about the evolution of the human race and how we can move forward versus how we can avoid ending up in a ditch. So now is a really scary time. It's a really pivotal point in human history. And this is why Aljosa and I are getting on, is because we recognize the historical nature of the event that we're in and all the factors at play. And we're wondering how they're going to play themselves out, what roles we can play in this, and how we might have to readjust our plans to be able to better fit the new situation, like what the possibilities could be, all this stuff. This is a really interesting topic, and it's also kind of hard to put into a nutshell and really talk about because there are so many factors. It really shakes the whole world. But as scary as it is, as seemingly close to the knife's edge as it makes us, as close as we're getting to this ditch, there's also some really good things happening and some really positive things that seem like they could be on the horizon if we can really get our together. And yeah, we're really hopeful, and if you're listening to this right now, which you are, because you wouldn't hear it if you weren't, we're really glad to be able to be sharing this time with you, and you're not alone. If you're listening to this, you're probably in the Integral community, which is pretty small. Hit up me or Aljosa if you need to talk, and we got your back. We're going to get through this stuff together.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. It almost seems like you are afraid people will misinterpret something.
Well,
what the hell are these guys talking about?
Well, it's like I'm sympathetic to people who come from a more individual themes, because I kind of feel like it might be more like a personality type thing than really a deep philosophy thing. I don't very many
it's that
people.
Simple though, because ideas make behaviors. I think it would be weird to just can't just say, oh, he's a neoliberal type from birth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's not what I mean. I think that just some people swing more towards the idea of a focus on the individual.
But there are reasons why that happens specifically in America and not here, for instance.
And there are traumatic reasons too, like a person who's gone through some hard times and some hard... Like one of the lessons you might learn on the way is, you know what, I can't control what other people do. I can only control myself. And self-control is the beginning of being able to do anything. So like a person who has this kind of philosophy, who's really had to do this for themselves, like I'm saying, it's more personal. Their ideas about individual power and willpower and...
Right, sure, right. But let's go with that. Okay, but let's say now this person, let's say becomes a politician and now says, well, I did all this. I had childhood, but I became successful. And now that person says to a homeless guy, well, guess what? Tie yourself by the boots and work hard like me and you'll be successful, right?
Yeah, so it's the same example of the successful black man that they trot out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not good logic. But people who have struggled hard to make it also want to feel proud of themselves for doing it. For those people, the motivation behind it is probably something like selfishness and greed. It's not even about what people say as much as it is about their motivation for saying it and like what they're defending. People get into all these philosophical arguments on the internet, myself included in that, but I think a lot of times from time to time I tend to dabble in some but a lot of the times it's not even really about the ideas, it's about some personal from their life that they're justifying or something like that. You know what I mean? As representing the Integral podcast, even though I want to make it clear that these particular philosophies are a problem, the zeitgeist is such that we need to make a serious change towards the more social and communal direction. And these ideas about individuality are like outdated and literally and factually incorrect and wrong. You know what I mean? And
Well,
a lot of
sort
people
where I'm
are
getting
just,
at, right?
people are just holding on to these things for childish and immature reasons a lot of the time.
So let's put it in perspective. You just said these ideas basically wrong.
I'm saying,
So let's acknowledge the fact they're basically wrong.
Well, I mean, like, this is why integralists try to upgrade our language, and we don't talk about individuals anymore. We talk about holons, because we understand the interconnectedness of everything and the fact that we're all related in this larger holarchy. A holon is something that is simultaneously a whole and a part. The word was coined by Arthur Koestler in his book The Ghost in the Machine. He figured out that although it's easy to identify subwholes or parts, wholes and parts in an absolute sense do not exist anywhere. So he proposed this word holon to describe the hybrid nature of subwholes and parts within living systems. From this perspective, holons exist simultaneously as self-contained wholes in relation to their subordinate parts, and as dependent parts when considered from the inverse direction. Holons are autonomous, self-reliant units that possess a degree of independence and handle contingencies without asking higher authorities for instructions. These holons are also simultaneously subject to control from one or more of these higher authorities. The first property ensures that the holons are stable forms in themselves that are able to withstand disturbances, while the latter property signifies that they are intermediate forms providing a context for the proper functionality of the larger whole. A holon is a system composed of other holons, and their structure exists at a balance point between order and chaos. Holons range in size from whatever the smallest particles are, all the way up to whatever the largest thing is, the multiverse. Individual humans and their societies and cultures are intermediate level holons, created by the interaction of forces working upon us both top down and bottom up. On a non-physical level, words, ideas, sounds, emotions, everything that can be identified is simultaneously a part of something and can be viewed as having parts of its own. Since a holon is embedded in larger wholes, it is influenced by and influences these larger wholes. And since a holon also contains subsystems or parts, it is similarly influenced by and influences these parts. Information flows bidirectionally between similar and larger systems, as well as rhizomatic contagion. When this bidirectionality of information flow and understanding of role is compromised, for whatever reason the system begins to break down. Wholes no longer recognize their dependence on their subsidiary parts, and parts no longer recognize the organizing authority of the wholes. Cancer may be understood as such a breakdown in the biological realm. This idea of an individual, not only is it wrong, as we're talking about, but it's also potentially cancerous and dangerous. The problem with this idea of an individual is that it doesn't recognize its inherent connection to the larger whole and to the larger process. And so it starts living for itself, and that is where it becomes like a form of cancer. And not only will that not help the individual, that will lead to the breakdown of a culture and a society. So a hierarchy of holons is called a holarchy. Now, being that we're at an intermediate place in this holarchy, the idea is that self is something that is both created from pressures coming from the top down and from the bottom up. So you could say, in some sense, from both nature and from nurture, from both our own biological impulses and drives coming up in our different states and whatever we might be going through on the inside, as well as top down coming from authority and culture and different ideas that are put upon us from the outside. And then these two forces come together to create whatever self we can manage in the moment.
Even Ken Wilber, who talked about holons, so we have individual holons, but there's no such thing as individual, there's only dividual. So he actually cuts off the ind word and just goes with dividual. Because if you say dividual, because individual would mean that you are independent of a system, but there's no such thing as an individual part, because every part is part of a larger system, right? Part of a higher holon. So there's no such thing as individual, there's only dividual. And this is how, if you read Ken Wilber, this is one of the things he's saying. So even all you integral neoliberalists, if there are any, even your baby Ken Wilber is circumventing the idea of individual. Obviously, Wilber has another problem with free will, but we're not going to let.
Right, he's saying that there's no individual because there's no nothing, because everything's a dream. That's a topic for another time. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to do both sides of it, because I feel like if anybody did feel attacked by this stuff, they're going to be like, oh, Aljosa is just a socialist, just a communist. These integral guys just on here advocating for socialism and communism and dissing on liberalism. Like, I don't want to get caught up in this liberal versus communal debate, because we include both, we value both, you know, it's about...
But there is a problem, right? There is no pure position. If I would say, well, you know, I'm a pure, let's say, say neoliberalist. Obviously, all communists and socialists will say, oh, these guys are just pure capitalists. They don't know shit, right? And if I say communism and socialism is good, all the capitalists will go, oh, these are just commies. They want to have 100 million people
This
die.
is how they always do it, though. They just go, oh, socialist, or oh, communist, and then they write you off, or oh, you're a liberal. In America, people don't even know what the word liberal means. So it's like...
Well, American illiteracy when it comes to history is
and
astonishing
philosophy
as well.
and stuff.
God bless America.
This is my point, though. It's like people here, they don't know.
Excuse me, was you saying something? You can't tell me nothing.
Like they're just parroting what they heard somebody say that they like or whatever. It's like people here don't even take the time to really think about things. Like people here don't have a coherent philosophy. If they do, it's not a good or mature one for the most part.
One of the things about neoliberalism that is so amazing for me is the fact that it gives you that false idea of freedom. So if somebody thinks he's a neoliberalist in America, he thinks, oh, I'm right, I know the truth, right? But at least somebody who's in totalitarian system, who's, let's say, a communist or something, although we can debate whether communism is even totalitarian in the original format Marx would envision, but we're not going to go there. So let's say some totalitarian system. At least totalitarian system, you kind of know you're part of the system. There's no guarding that point. But in capitalism, you're in it, but in a perverse kind of way. So they kind of give you a false idea that you're free. But obviously the problem is, what is even freedom in this case, right? And this is something I pointed out as well. So there are two ways of having totalitarian control, if you will. So let's say you have a capitalist, and let's say you have some totalitarian guy. So a capitalist will come to a homeless person and say, hey, you are free to get a job and you can become not homeless. And totalitarian is gonna say, hey, you're homeless and this is the way it is. This is how the state wants it. Screw you. Now, the problem is that even in no, but here's the catch. In capitalism, states also wants you to be homeless, but just gives you this false idea that you're free because you have some kind of magic free will. So at least
they want you to be homeless so they could throw you in jail so they can make money off.
Yeah. But they give you this false sense of freedom because there's no such thing as free will. So you have this idea, yeah, I'm free, I can get a job. So guys, it's my problem. It's never the system's problem.
Right.
And this is how you control people. So people always think, oh, it's all my fault. The capitalism is perfect. Government doesn't interfere. It's all me. Right?
And when everything goes wrong, then it's like you can scapegoat these people and be like, see, that's why they were messed up. And then we never have to take responsibility for how we created them as a system. Like how we consistently create these people. All these messed up people are everywhere. It must be because they're all bad, not because we're consistently creating all these messed up people. But to your previous point, there's a really good quote that says, the reason that socialism never took root in America is because the average worker doesn't see themselves as an exploited and disenfranchised proletariat, but as a temporarily embarrassed millionaire.
Yeah, I heard that quote. Yeah. Here's how America sees their homeless. They're just potential millionaires. That's it. They have freedom to do whatever they want. All homeless are just potential millionaires. They just need to get their act together.
We've all heard the stories. The person who went from being homeless to a millionaire, that means anybody can do it.
Exactly.
We have this kind of infinite confidence in ourselves, and it's definitely undeserved, but it's kind of like a type of idealism. Sometimes it's incredibly naive, but there is something kind of beautiful about it because sometimes some of these people are actually able to do some pretty amazing stuff on the back of it. Big picture.
I agree. There are some people who did a lot with this kind of ideology. That same ideology makes a lot of people suffer. So
yeah, because those people are really lucky, right? They're like the statistical anomaly. They're not like the average person.
Let's say you have 10 homeless people, right? And let's say all of them read a book, How to Become a Millionaire. And let's say one of them succeeds. So what's going to happen then is that one person is really going to think that he succeeded because he really worked hard. And he thinks that if you, all other 9 homeless people will work hard, you're also going to be millionaire just like me, right? But in systemic reality, that's impossible because capitalism needs homeless people, needs poor people, right? And the problem is that people
it has
who
to be this. There will always be more have-nots than haves, statistically.
So this is the problem I have with people in self-help because let's give a third example. Let's say America is overrun by Hitler, but let's say Hitler is also a self-help guru and life coach. Now a homeless person would come to Hitler and he would say, I'm poor, I need money. And Hitler would say, no, you can do it. Just focus. Law of attraction. The reason you're like this is because you don't have enough positive thoughts. When you're not really homeless, just view your situation as a potential millionaire. You will attract what you wish and like that, right? So this would be your kind of self-help totalitarian Hitler that would say. So again, all these false ideas of freedom are used to keep poor people poor without them realizing it's all a system. When a black guy succeeds, or when one of the homeless people becomes successful, oh look, see, free market, if you really work hard, you're gonna do it. So it's an ideology where a lot of people suffer.
A lot of these slaves have really thick work ethic too. They take so much pride in their work ethic, and it becomes a philosophy that allows their bosses to overly exploit them consistently. They take pride in their work. Yeah, they're like, I take pride in my work. You're like, you're working a shitty job at a big corporation that doesn't care about you, exploits you, and treats you like just another number. Instead of wanting to do anything to get more for yourself, you're going to take pride in your work. It's like the same kind of liberal philosophy too. It's, oh, don't give healthcare to just anybody. Like, people should have to earn that. Does it hurt you? Like, literally nothing changes, and like we don't even change the taxes. It's like you want to deny people because you feel like they didn't earn it. Like, this is where you're coming from. Like, should we shut down public schools unless people can test in to like prove that they're good enough or something like that? You want to do that? I mean, you could still have your private school. I don't get it, man. They like legit want to deny things to people.
This is where I kind of think that neoliberalism kind of falls apart, is this idea that everybody needs to earn. In the punchline is even this. Even people who do succeed usually are already in successful families by nepotism, like their father was a director or whatever. It's very rarely that you have somebody who's homeless, raped, whatever, and then becomes a millionaire. It happens from time to time. But in general, most people, even people who succeed in any kind of way, usually had a lot more social plugs from their rich family or whatever. So they were put in position that their success was basically inevitable, right?
It like turns the world into a type of Hunger Games. People, there's limited resources and we're all gonna get some, and I'm gonna get mine, and you're gonna, if you get in my way, you're gonna die. I'm getting mine. It's not thought of as this like, oh, if you succeed, that's good for me too. It's thought of, if you give money to this person, it's like a handout to a lazy person. It's not an investment in our collective future. Oh, if they were succeeding, we'd all be doing better. It's like this idea of people feel like they have to be on top. If other people succeed, it's like a threat to their own success or something.
That's why I actually cherish totalitarian honesty more than fake honesty that capitalism provides for you. I rather see somebody say, look, this is how the things are, so shut the fuck up, than somebody say, oh, anything's possible, you can do it, you're free. You know what I mean?
The American dream is... It's like a matrix. It's like...
Yeah, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
Anybody who thinks that the American dream is viable right now is out of touch with reality. Like, nobody can afford to buy a house unless you're like super lucky or like set up somehow or like in some kind of 9-to-5 super drudgery in a more high position. People can't afford to live out here. You're right when you talk about the imminent collapse. It has been going down. It's been on its last leg. I said I would be surprised if it makes it 10 years ago. So, I mean, it makes sense that something like this would take it down. I was actually hoping that maybe the Yang thing would stretch it out, because honestly, for me, I would really like to see humanity naturally grow up and decide to choose to do better. I'm sure that there's going to be events and stuff like this that help move it along. But yeah, I'm really worried about the regression as opposed to actually mature, natural, healthy, sustainable progress.
One thing that I was accusing Sam Harris for was he didn't kind of criticize liberalism enough, at least this extreme version. Again, we are all about putting both themes into play, right? One of the weaknesses that Sam Harris, in my opinion, as a philosopher has, is this idea that he doesn't kind of criticize, he's aware of the problems. I just think he doesn't emphasize the neoliberalism downfalls. And this is the first time I heard him actually say that this neoliberal thing is not going to work anymore. So if Sam Harris starting to critique neoliberalism, then you know world. Because usually this Western rational optimists, so Dawkins, Dennett, Pinker, Harris, usually they kind of stay away from criticizing liberalism. I think that they should probably start to criticize that capitalistic system a bit more as well. I wonder, did you watch anything that Ken Wilber said? So how is Spirit of Love in form of Corona? What is Spirit of Love trying to show us?
Is Ken Wilber even talking about this? I would say Ken Wilber needs to isolate real hard right now. If anybody can isolate, it's Ken Ken Wilber.
The guy lives in his own bubble for centuries. Don't you worry about
that. Right. He's mastered deep levels of mental isolation.
So it's kind of funny because if you have this kind of romantic version of, even when we were criticizing Ken Wilber, when we were saying, well, why does this spirit of love show in other planets? Why only Earth, right? So how do you see, how would Wilber describe this corona? What is this, like kind of a cosmos giving us a new solutions? I don't know, how would you...
The cosmos is giving us a gift of awareness and awakening on all levels. We should all be grateful for this new time of connection and the Aquarian awakening, and our whole consciousness will come to a higher vibration as the planet starts to come together and see what's really important now more than ever before. And I mean, of course, there's good stuff in that, it's true, but at the same time, it's not all love and light. Like, the possibility for regression is real. The possibility for breakdown and not breakthrough is real. Don't let these love and light people fool you into thinking that is just going to always go well, because it's not. This is the problem with some of that Hegelian philosophy where you think that stuff is just inevitable, or like we're moving towards some kind of omega point or some kind of super event of ultimate consciousness or something like this.
I think that Hegel was also pro-war because he saw war as a good way for people, I think, to see the real problems or take problems seriously.
Sure.
So he saw the war between nations as something, and again, I'm not saying he's necessarily wrong. I think that when war happens,
it's true on a level.
Yeah, it is true on a level.
We just can't passively sit by or optimistically be delusional about what can happen. We need to be realistic as integralists especially, and understand the different possibilities here, and realize that if things are going to do good in the world, it's because we need to get together and actually do something about it. It's not just going to happen. It's going to happen because we take action and there are real consequences. This is real.
So another interesting thing is, and this is something Neil deGrasse said, will people, again, this is more for America, I'm so sorry to hit on America today.
Bring it.
But
God bless America.
Will people listen to science? Because, and this coronavirus just proves that we live in scientific world whether we like it or not. But because if you look at back in the day, people thought, oh, this is the curse of the gods, this and that, God is not happy, blah blah blah, right? But now we live in a freaking scientific world.
I have a right to my own opinion, and you have a right to your own opinion, okay? So you just stay over there with your opinion, and I'll stay over here with my opinion, and that's democracy. I have my rights, okay? So don't sit over there and try to judge me. Only God can judge me, okay, buddy? Stay off my property. I got a gun. I know some of these people.
Yes. How do you see this problem? Obviously, America has another problem of scientific illiteracy. Of course, there are some brilliant scientists in America.
I didn't come from no monkey, buddy. Get out of here with your science. That's just another man's opinion. I listen to God and the Bible.
The person you're impersonating right now, right? So we have now experts who, even Trump thinks he has like some kind of a gene that he's a great scientist, or he has a feel for science, right? Because his uncle was some kind of scientist or something.
I have science in my DNA.
So where are the anti-vaxxers now, right? We all are desperately looking for a vaccine. How do you see people who, believe in this stuff, like people who don't believe in science?
Well, green people will probably still think it's like a conspiracy or something like this. The government doing this. Yeah, and I mean, hey, they could be right.
I mean, some people think it's the starting of the end times. Some Christians might think, oh, this is just the start, Jesus is gonna...
Man, they've been like sitting around waiting for the end times. They're just
this is another...
Wait, could this be the end times? Maybe it's the end times. Here comes 2000. Maybe it's the end times. They're just like looking for anything to possibly please God, let it be the end times.
You have a whole Wikipedia page of people.
History of all the times people thought it was the end times. Every couple years, it's the end times. Do you remember not that long ago, there was another one? People literally selling their stuff.
I mean, the 2012 was one of the biggest one, because I think some Mayan calendar showed us it's going to be the end of the world in 2012.
People are desperately ready for a change. They know that is f***ed up. We need new solutions, and there's not anything inspiring going on right now. There's not like some movement or something that is like the thing that you can believe in and be like, yeah, they're doing it. It's going to happen. There's like, we're planting trees. It's like, yeah, that's great. Plant those trees. Do that. Like, we're picking up plastic. Like, yeah, great. Of course. Good. Get that plastic. You know what I mean? mean? Like, we're feeding these, but it's all like addressing the symptoms. There's nothing that's actually seems like a viable solution to any of our problems. There's just all these people desperately treating the hemorrhaging symptoms.
Here's my argument. The reason this is happening, this patchline solutions, is one of the major reasons is exactly this neoliberal ideology. This is my kind of argument here. The reasons these things are happening, even at green level, is because of this hyper-individualism that America is advertising. Or at least this is one of the major reasons. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely the philosophy is like a type of cognitive cancer. The idea of a separate individual acting selfishly, divorced from the larger context, that's what a cancerous cell is. It's a cell that has gone rogue and is now multiplying to its own ends. If you're not in touch with the bigger picture, if you're not living in accord with the environment, with the system, to some extent, you're hurting it probably. Of course, there are some agents that act outside of the system to help refine and expand it, but then there's plenty of other ones that are really dragging it down. This is where that liberal philosophy is really unhealthy. It doesn't think of itself as part of the bigger system. It wants to act like it can just separate off and act like its own thing on some kind of island somewhere and do whatever it wants, under this delusion that what they do doesn't affect other people, or that their success is something that they've fully gotten on their own. The whole idea of their individuality is completely false. It's an unhealthy, outdated belief system that humanity is stuck in from past times, based on outdated ways of thinking before we understood the microcosm and macrocosm of the universe, before we understood cells and how there's a whole ecosystem of life happening in our mouths right now, and that we're a part of this ecosystem. This is all really actually very new historically, this understanding, and most people are operating on very outdated philosophies, thinking that they're an individual. Like, this comes from the idea of souls. We are still living in the beginning of this integral age where we're going to have this transvaluation of values, where we deconstruct the outdated ways of talking about things and we come out with new, more refined, better ways of talking about things, as well as understanding language in general. So instead of using words like individual, we'll start to use words like whole on, because it's more true and in touch with the nature of reality. And that idea of individual will become a word to some of us like the word faith or soul or something like that, or God. It's got some kind of a outdated, wrong idea kind of connotation around it that's based on us being able to outgrow it and see it for what it is. So that's really important, and hopefully that's the reason that you and I are talking about the coronavirus, and hopefully it makes a big enough dent in the consciousness of humanity that it can actually trigger some real change.
I think another interesting thing is that if you look at history, right, so obviously there were things that happened, like the First World War, Second World War, Cold War, and then some minor economic collapses. But in general, I think that last couple of decades, there wasn't any major world wars, and things have been quite stable. I think that last 30 years, things, if you look at least Western society, I think we got used to this kind of almost peace and progress, and everything seems so fine, right? And I think we got too comfortable in it. I think this corona, because now it's all over the world, it gives us two kind of lessons here that I think we should learn. So one is we are all in it together. Like you said, everything's connected. There's no such thing as individuals. There was a Slovenian article in what's going to happen to homeless people. Like, homeless people also can have a disease, right? So, and this is the same problem in America, don't get me wrong, right? So we have this ironic glimpse that corona is giving us. We are all in this one ecosystem together, and the system is gonna fall by the weakest link. So we need to help that weakest link as well, or that weakest link will become the problem. We need to take care of each other. Obviously, that could be my idealistic delusion, but we don't have many choices. Either we're gonna take care of ourselves, and capitalism is not gonna do it, at least not in this form, or we're gonna go back to some state barbarism or something. What do you think are gonna be the lessons if we survive corona? What do you think are the most important lessons here?
Yeah, I think the lessons are definitely gratefulness for just how free we were before, and how much things were accessible, and how much we could walk around and access things. I mean, if this is a thing that's going to continue on, and honestly, I think this is going to activate a lot of people who were germaphobes, and you're going to have a lot more people who are washing their hands as a part of their routine. They're going to keep a lot of this kind of and stuff. So germ consciousness is a thing that's going to be a part of our society more now, and that's probably good. My concern, I guess, long term, I mean, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, so I mean, correct me if I'm wrong about this in the comments, but I'm concerned that if we get too sanitized and germophobe, that will develop more allergies, and that could be a problem in the long term. But going back to this question about lessons and stuff, hopefully people in this time are taking some much needed time off. I mean, hopefully people aren't just stressing out. Hopefully people are now turning to some projects that they weren't able to get to before, taking more of them time, relaxing a little bit, maybe spending time with people that they love who they haven't been able to connect with before because they've been so caught up in their stuff. Hopefully this breaks us out of all of our patterns and helps us to really love each other and get in touch with what really matters. And hopefully it breaks down some of this capitalistic delusion and illusion of separateness, and it starts to reveal some of this interconnection, like you're saying, and opens up some gratefulness and stuff.
I think that we basically lived in this kind of mass capitalistic hypnosis. I mean, we kind of know something will go down eventually, but we just didn't want to think about it. We were like, oh, even if it happens, you know, capitalism always did its job, always managed to kind of climb out, right? But I think there's an end point eventually. I don't think capitalism will climb out forever, right? Even if it's gonna climb out of Corona, at some point it's gonna meet its end, and we better have some new, more collective and better resource management system online. And I hope that this virus can kind of help us with that. For instance, look at something like online schools. So me and my friend, he was always proponent of schooling online. Why have all these teachers and all these people going to schools when you can do online, save a lot on traffic, pollution? I mean, there's so many good things about online schooling, right? And if you went to the government and say, hey, let's do online schools, and I know there are probably some private online schools, but in general they would say, no, are you crazy? We need to have all these schools. But now with Corona, everything, you know, you have 2 days and all schools are online, right? So if you wanted to have more, let's say, standardized online schools, you'd have to go through all these procedures and paperwork in the government, like we were saying, bureaucracy and so on. But when tragedy like this hits, in 2 days everything's solved. Also the work from home. So you have a lot of moms who need to go work in office and maybe not take care of their children and so on. But now more and more people can see, oh, I can actually work from home. So I think this is also going to kind of see that with technology, because again, capitalism kind of always falls behind technology, how we can see this whole society totally different, even if it's under capitalism, but how technology can drastically change how we see our jobs, how we see our school system based on the technology. And basically it almost kind of accelerates technological capitalism. Do you know what I mean?
Capitalism 2.0. Everyone just stays at home. I feel you though.
This is where we're going. This is not a joke.
It makes sense, you know, like, I always thought it was kind of interesting because I feel like religious people, they trap themselves in this kind of ideological box. I feel like capitalists and Americans, they isolate themselves in these like gated communities and these little mini mansions in their like own little worlds, and then like postmodernists isolate themselves in their own realities, creating their own language that only they can speak or something like this. It's interesting to see capitalism leading to this point to where, yeah, you just never leave your house and everything just comes to you and you can work from home, and like you can literally isolate yourself in your own like little box.
I wasn't necessarily hinting at extreme isolation or anything like that. I was just more like optimizing in terms of not polluting, right? There's no point.
Right.
If mom doesn't need to go to an office, if she can do her stupid job at home and maybe take care of the children at the same time. So for me, it's more like a stress relief and ecological solution.
Right. Yeah. People more become more freelance, and that's actually really good. Yeah. I guess I'm just saying, in the same way that people criticize the phone thing, right? It's like, yeah, actually we're more connected now than ever before. I may be like looking at my phone and like maybe not paying as much attention to what's going on around me, but I'm also connecting to Aljosa in Slovenia and this other person and over here, and like I'm able to actually connect to way more people because of this thing. There's pros and cons, and maybe, yeah, the pros outweigh the cons, so that's good. I'm curious, what do you think are the solutions? Like, what do you think people will do, and what would you think that we should do?
I'll give you what Zizek kind of posted, although he's using communism here so this is all by, I mean, communism needed today, or as Will Hutton put it, now one form of unregulated free market globalization with its prosperity for crises and pandemics is clearly dying, but another form that recognizes the interdependence and the primacy of evidence-based collective action is born.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's using more kind of fancy words, but it's basically saying that we need to have a system that is in line with the nature, the scientific evidence-based nature that we know. And this is something I said. Economy is not about capitalism versus socialism versus communism, whatever you want to call it. Economy, if you just barebone it, right, it's about resource management. And that resource management needs to be based on reality, not based on some supply and demand of some stupid people, right? Because this is what neoliberalism, this is another problem of value theory, because in neoliberalism, people decide what's valuable, right? So if I sell you healing crystals and let's say, oh, here, David, I have these healing crystals will help you with your coronavirus, right? And if you buy that, but if you buy that, that's valuable, right? Because, because the theory of value is subjective. If a
supply and demand, baby.
Yeah, exactly. And we can have stupid people deciding what's valuable, but we're not going to go into theories of value right now because that's a discussion for another podcast. But I'm just saying these are dangerous ideas that neoliberalism is creating.
But it does allow for the Wu-Tang Clan to sell their album for how much? A lot.
Yeah, sure, but it's kind of different because here, I mean, Wu-Tang, at least you get some kind of a song. I mean, it would be another thing if I say, hey, I have this old Wu-Tang album and it's gonna help you cure corona.
All I'm saying is Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to f with.
I agree with that. So basically what Zizek was saying is, and basically a lot of economists and philosophers in general, not just gonna point out Zizek here, but the idea is that philosophers in general seem to hope, and economists seem to hope that this can connect the world together and maybe have more like a centralized healthcare system that would be online when something like this happens. Because now it's still kind of every continent, so you have communist China doing their thing, Korea, Italy, everybody's doing their thing. It's this kind of vague collectiveness, but what Zizek is kind of hoping is that we're going to have this kind of more global healthcare system and maybe even global welfare system and so on. And what most people here are hoping is that if we survive this, that this will connect the world, because we are already connected technologically, obviously, but can we connect on a more holistic systemic level? And this is, we kind of hope that this crisis will open the door for this collective mindset, because we realize now this is a worldly thing, that we are all, like you said before, and we are barking almost every podcast, that we are all interconnected. There's no individuals, there are only individuals. We quote Ken Wilber here. So this is what I hope is the most important thing.
Aljosa, he's an undercover Freemason trying to advocate for the New World Order. He wants you to get the mark of the beast. It's the end of days, buddy. The Bible says in Revelations.
I'm gonna keep this in just because I'm afraid some lunatic is gonna come and say that, that I'm some kind of a globalist, I'm part of the
conspiracy, he's part of the New World Order
society, and I want to take over. Jesus Christ.
This is just what they want you to think. The Rockefellers, they're trying to bring us all under a new world order together with the world government, and then they'll control us all.
So another thing that Sam Harris kind of pointed out, could this pandemic be a dress rehearsal for something bigger like global warming, like any other pandemic, right? Because, okay, this is kind of puts the whole world on alert. This is gonna obviously make us rethink a lot of our systems. But again, the catastrophes that are waiting us when it comes to global warming, economic inequalities, resource depletion, another such global effort will be necessary. And I hope this coronavirus could be a great rehearsal for other, a lot bigger problems.
Yeah,
so
let's
this
hope
is
so.
what I hope. What I'm afraid might happen is, okay, so we're gonna become more social. There's gonna be more healthcare policies and so on, because we realize that homeless people might need home and so on. But I just hope that we're not gonna lose this at some time and just become comfortable for another 30 years. I think that's not gonna happen because there's gonna be other global challenges. But like I said, if I'm gonna put it in all in one word, I hope we get this more collective kind of consciousness, if you will. And usually these kind of historic events bring us there. So this is what I hope Corona will bring, this more communal themes, communal consciousness, if you will. What's your kind of hope?
Well, I'm all for the general idea of more communal consciousness, but I honestly think that if the government doesn't bail out most people, I really worry about that. Like, I know the government bailed out the banks and kind of left the individuals high and dry in like the real estate crash. So I'm kind of feeling like the big businesses and people who have been like good boys and girls like will get some like thing based on their taxes, and they'll probably get break on their like leases and the different things that they have to pay. But poor people, a lot of them will just be completely SOL or out of luck or up creek or any of these types of things. And that is really scary because they will become desperate people trying to figure out what to do, and that is not a good situation.
Yeah, this is kind of funny, because people in your comment section, when you made that free healthcare post, people are like, where is the money gonna come from? Well, where is the money gonna come from when Boeing is trying to pursue the government to bail them out, because obviously all the aircraft industry is down right now, right? Well, where is the money gonna come from there? Why is nobody asking that question? Why doesn't the government go to Boeing and say, hey, I don't know where the money is. Where is it gonna come from? We don't know either.
It just seems like these people think that they're gonna get their taxes raised and they're gonna have to pay extra, and they are already tired of having to pay extra. And it's almost just like they think that they're gonna have to pay more. That's why I try to tell these people that we are already spending ridiculous amounts of money on the military, and if we just reprioritize our budget, we could already do all this stuff. We could probably send people to school for free and stuff too.
Nobody really refuted that point. They just kind of
brushed
it aside. Oh no, it's all free. It's free. The free is the problem. It's not really free. I mean, dudes, what the f is wrong with you? This is what I got in my mind, right? What are you talking about freedom? We know it's not free, idiots.
Yeah, some people who can't really win in making their point try to just win by making you seem wrong, and so they'll focus on a semantic instead of really trying to honestly address what a person is talking about. It's like just dishonest arguing.
Yeah, when somebody says something stupid like that, like, well, it's not really free. I mean, for me, it's an insult to my intelligence. Like, are you freaking kidding me? If somebody would say that to me, I would immediately disqualify him and probably block him from a side if I had a side. Because the amount of stupidity that somebody needs to present to say something like that, where's the money gonna come from, or free, is just, I just dismiss such a person.
Right.
I'm not gonna even bother.
Well, the first time, I don't mind saying, look, I know it's not free. I know we all pay for it with our taxes. And if anything, just the fact that we do pay for it already, we should want to get the most amenities we can out of our money. Like, we pay for it. Like, we should have that kind of an idea. Not like, where's the money going to come from? But like, hey, I freaking pay my taxes. I want to be taken care of. Like, freedom to, not just freedom from. Yeah, the whole like focus on the semantic thing is just kind of, they've already lost before they've even started.
Yeah, so I hope that those people will now go and send email to Boeing and say, hey, Boeing, we don't know where the money is going to come from. Yeah, why does the money Boeing come from have that problem? Yeah, where does that money come from?
When like dad's buying all these new freaking military machines and they just sit around and he's just like, well, I had to have the new upgraded one. Like, it makes my collection look so awesome. My is so big. Like, I have the biggest in the world. Like, okay, Dad, maybe we could stop having such a big and we could actually take care of people. Maybe you should let Mom have enough money so that way she can do her nurse thing or whatever. Something like that. But what do you think's going to actually happen? Do you think that people are going to get bailed out and there's going to actually be some kind of real solution on the back end of this? Are we going to actually have systems that do something in a more communal or socialist direction? Is there going to be like a New Deal?
So let's try to put ourselves in a totally, let's say, some selfish capitalistic CEO, right? I think that at this point, if you want to save the society, and I think Andrew Yang's solution is probably, I mean, either you're gonna exempt them from all the bills, obviously people can pay if they don't have jobs, or you're just gonna, I think that universal basic income, again, this would also be inevitable because of the technological employment and many other issues, but I think this is just gonna accelerate the universal basic income. You can have systems that people have no job, and ironically, even at Fox
that would be
News,
great.
Even at Fox News, they were saying, somebody said, Andrew Yang had idea for universal basic income, and even the host at Fox News said, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, we should just give people money. Even though those people are usually the ones who say, no, we don't want to give lazy people money. All of a sudden, she changed her mind and said, yeah, let's just give her money. Even the right extremist on Fox News is like, yeah, let's go for it, give them money. So it's kind of interesting how people can easily, but she justified it in a way, oh yeah, but it's still a capitalistic system. He's just getting the money, right? she didn't actually, because usually when you say UBI, usually people think, oh, it's socialism, right? But she just kept the capitalism word, but just makes it, yeah, why not give him money? We can do that within capitalism. So it made sense for her. So it's this kind of interesting psychological trick, how you can still justify capitalism if you kind of word it correctly, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. It's interesting how fast these people flip in crisis. Oh, it's socialism. I think what is actually happening is that a lot of these Republicans are going to use this as an opportunity to try and change the narrative a little bit. Or they're going to be of this narrative of maybe like, we might be the ones who give everybody a certain amount, and it's going to be the Democrats who are going to be the ones who try to figure out in some kind of legalistic way who gets it or something like that. I could be wrong, but that might be a way that it goes. Because it's politics, you know?
I hope that Corona will just accelerate things, like I said, online schools, online jobs, universal basic income, obviously. All those things that would take a lot of time with legislations, and, you know, a lot of people would be against that and so on. But I hope that, again, this will make countries a bit more welfare-y, if you will. So their welfare system, not just healthcare, although that's also important, but their welfare system. So here's my argument. If you don't want to give people free healthcare, they give them free money so they can pay for paid healthcare, you know what I mean? But do something. And I hope that Corona will at least kind of accelerate all those things that progressives try to put on the table. And like I said before, just make people see things in more collective thing, that there's no such thing as law and attraction. If you work hard and you work smart, you're still gonna be a loser most likely. Unless we create a system where everybody can live normally, we can all be winners, or we're just gonna pretend some people are winner because they work hard. And I hope that we can create a system where everybody's a winner. Not equal, just
not
a winner
equal.
in terms of, yeah, not equal. I'm not for equality.
People's basic needs can be met, and we can invest in people who are willing to put in the work to do better for themselves.
I'm not for some stupid equality where everybody's equal.
Right.
I'm totally fine with Bill Gates having millions. I just want to see a homeless person out of the street. Is that so much?
Right. There's like, now that we're at this point of human development, I think that we can have some kind of a baseline where nobody has to worry about whether they're going to be able to survive or not. That seems totally viable. People can generally have their basic needs met, and then anything that they do on top of that is gravy.
And can be properly rewarded.
And they can be properly I mean, honestly, if you have a society like this, you no longer have an economic elite. What you have is something like social value through respect or something like that. People like respect you for what you contribute. Now it's not, oh, it's a doctor, he gets paid more. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a doctor, he saves people's lives. Like, he didn't have to go into that. He chose to go into that because he cares about people. And you would have people who would become doctors because they care about people and they want to help and they want to do that. So people would actually be doing the jobs that they want to do because they want to do them for like authentic reasons, not for like, economic motivations. And I mean, there's all kinds of other arguments too, like in a non-capitalist society, you can actually have a more healthy version of love because ladies will get with a man who actually can fulfill their needs based on like having a healthy relationship, as opposed to wanting to get with a man for economic reasons based on his position in the economic hierarchy. Now you'll have men who are recognized for their value as people, and you can have more healthy relationships. So there's a bunch of different values that can come from having people's basic needs met. That's kind of the end of the injustice of segregation and racism and all this stuff too. If you have everyone's basic needs met, you're much, much closer to real justice and a healthy society where people can actually thrive. It's people who are living in these positions where they're constantly worrying about their economic system, so they turn to drugs, they turn to sale of drugs, they turn to robbery and all of these terrible, terrible things. It's because the aberrant behavior, the bad behavior, is a product of their desperateness and their poor quality of life. So there's tons of positive stuff that can come from moving more in this direction to where people's basic needs are met.
I hope that this will kind of give us that awareness awareness a bit more, because we need to take care of everybody, even the homeless, because they can also spread the disease. And I hope that this disease can kind of help us see that we are all connected, and that some private capitalists cannot just run away on some stupid island because they were lucky that they were born in the right place at the right time. So I totally agree. I hope that all these things will make us rethink our system, rethink our economy, rethink our cyclical economy, rethink our healthcare, welfare. Maybe not. Maybe it's gonna be capitalism as usual. After a few years, we're gonna come back to normal. But I don't think that's even possible at this point, because too many things will go wrong if we continue either way.
So I'm gonna ask you, Alyosha, what is your type? Do you know? Are you like a INFJ, INTJ?
I don't know my type. If you're specifically going to Myers-Briggs, and there's a problem. Even if we go, I'm probably more introvert, I guess, more in the introvert side. I already forgot the other.
I'm gonna say that you're an INFJ. That's probably what I'm thinking.
I think I did the test years ago, but I never really bothered with it in recent times. But I think it's kind of hard to kind of pinpoint somebody, because I feel like I'm bipolar when it comes to these types, because sometimes I can be this, sometimes I can be that. But if you want to have like a macro picture, I would probably say a more introvert. And I forgot the other versions, but maybe you can know better than I can.
Yeah, I'm gonna say you're an INFJ.
Let's go with that.
I'm that too, so I think that's how I can recognize you.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool. We're pretty great. We're the rarest type, I think. 0.5% of the world's population. And most of us are very depressed.
Well,
anyways.
Yeah, I get depressed. What kind of triggers me, people who don't see the bigger picture like this are the ones who usually trigger me. Like people who say, oh, if the word free, oh, you know, you can do it, you're just approaching your situation different, oh, you just have shadow issues with capitalism. Those people kind of trigger me, because they are brainwashed and not seeing reality. They can't, you know, it's all about, well, the capitalism is really the problem, you're just framing it wrong or something like that, right? It's always you. And they don't see that this is also ideology. They're being brainwashed. And those people kind of trigger me a lot.
Yeah, I get it, man.
So I guess I do have shadow. Maybe she was right.
Yeah. But the thing about having shadow is that it probably just makes you more sensitive to a certain type of problem. So if you notice it, like, it's actually the person who has a shadow issue around something who can be like the canary in the coal mine, who will like spot the thing when other people don't. Like you said, it's like arguing that Einstein has a shadow around Newtonian physics. Yeah. And, well, okay, maybe he does, but is his theory right or not? It's a different topic. It's a different question.
People don't care about what's true. They just care, oh, we're going to talk about your psychoanalyze you and your shadows. Well, no, this is not how philosophy works. I'm not saying even she's wrong. Maybe I do have shadows. I'm not necessarily denying her, but this is not the topic we're talking about. She's talking about upper left quadrants and problems I have with those versus what's lower right truth, which I'm talking about. She's kind of switching the subject there.
This is, I would say, in this case, this person, I've seen them do this to multiple people multiple times. It's like one of those situations, like if the one tool you have is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. You know, she was basically kind of upper left quadrant reductionist in terms of her approach, right? She was basically saying, well, everything comes back to individual responsibility
and how they view the situation.
Free thinking. It's like you can't free think yourself into healthcare. That's not how it works, really. And I mean, it's kind of a chicken and the egg problem, right? Because it's actually the culture and the system that creates the individual as much as it is individuals that create systems and cultures. Like, we're all victims to the system. So I mean, if you want to talk about what one is really primary, what really comes first, it's the big picture, it's the system. If you want to change the world, you got to change the system. And yeah, that starts by changing yourself. But if you want to really talk about what's primary, the reason you are what you are, and even the reason you would even be able to change yourself in the first place, is because you got some kind of conditioning along the way that sets you up to be the kind of person who could make those sorts of distinctions.
Or you who just happen to have the right systemic pressures at the right time to make you come
just
to these
kind of
conclusions.
Lucky. At that point, you're that black guy who the Republicans trot out, rule of threes, it's got to come back again, and you're a lucky case. Just because you can do it doesn't mean that everybody can do it. And I mean, that is a different situation than to ask, like, could we live in a world where we just provided for everyone's basic needs? Instead of asking if they deserve it, like, why not just ask whether we can do it or not? Like, would it be a big deal if we just made sure everybody was taken care of?
Not just huge corporations and CEOs.
Yeah, can we do it? Not like, do they deserve it? Like, that's a different question. Maybe we get to a point in history where everyone can deserve it because we're actually thriving and doing so well that we don't even have to think about who deserves it. Maybe we just get to a point where we can invest in everybody who shows that they're worth investing in.
This problem of who deserves what, right? So again, this comes down from, I think it was Malthusian. I think it was Thomas Malthusian. And basically the Malthusian trap, which says that inevitably some people will perish because the economic system cannot sustain them. That was before Industrial Revolution, right? He said that famous quote. The problem is that between then, obviously this quote totally fall apart after that, because Industrial Revolution made sure that there's a lot more people now and it can easily sustain all of them, right? Obviously. But the mindset is still this, I'm gonna call it Bronze Age mindset, that people still think, oh, we don't have enough for everybody. We have more than enough. We just still have this old operating system that thinks that doesn't.
I like to call it like the law of the jungle, like where people think that humans are the best, but at the same time operate from this, like, it's the law of the jungle and Darwin and let these people die kind of a thing if they can't. Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, that's just the law of the jungle. It's like, well, we don't live in the jungle. It's 2020. We live in the most rich country in the world. I think we can probably afford to take care of people's basic needs, and we don't have to ask if they deserve it. We can just be proud that we take care of our people.
Here's another irony. Even old cultures that lived in jungle, a lot of them survived and didn't have poverty, which is kind of another weird thing. Even bonobos who live in they did study between bonobos and chimpanzees, and bonobos, because they live in a lush environment, they have a lot less oppressive hierarchies and are a lot more collective, while chimpanzees are a lot more totalitarians. Even animals can be a lot more altruistic than you would think. So again, this idea of, oh, it's the law of the jungle, the strongest survive, this is again misinterpretation of Darwinism. It's based on the environment. There's no like universal strongest survive or something like that.
Alyosha, I don't come from no monkey. I already told you that.
There's gonna be some right-winger who's watching this. You're just answering all the questions for him. He would be like,
he's like,
I was thinking the same thing. How does he know I was thinking that? Is he a witch?
I'm an American, so, you know, my form of humor is basic mockery and just like impersonation, right? I can't do the UK European style of like cold wit and dry delivery. For me, I have to like be goofy and ridiculous, right? Yeah, you're gonna agree with that.
You're doing a great job.
Well, thanks.
You're even that English guy you did. Yeah, that was great. You have a bit of talent for voice acting, I think.
Thank you, man.
Do you have anything you want to add?
I think we solved it. Alyosha and David, we are the cure to coronavirus. We are the vaccine that you've been looking for. All you have to do is listen to each one of our podcasts twice. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe, or you're gonna die.
And follow us on social media.
Make sure you share with your friends, or you're gonna die. Yeah. It's the end of the world, and if you don't subscribe to us and follow and listen to all of our podcasts, you're doomed. How's that for an outro? Thanks to all the people who are out there who are going to really make it. I'm sorry if that's not you. You should really step up and make sure you listen and leave all those likes and all that stuff. Make sure you check us out next time when we do a podcast about Sam Harris's wife's book on consciousness.
What is consciousness? Yeah.
What is consciousness? That's going to be our next one. And we probably got some other more stuff coming down the pike. If you have any requests, put them in the description. Questions.
Or comments, whatever.
Or if you want to send supplies to either I or Alyosha, please consider doing that. Hit us up personally. We'll tell you where to send money and supplies. I'm serious about that. I wouldn't mind.
Toilet paper, though.
You can send your toilet paper to me. If you have access to a duvet attachment for a toilet, please send it my way. I'd like to try it. Alyosha's a savage, though. He's not interested in that. Thanks to everybody again for listening, and we hope everybody out there is going to stay safe and healthy. We love you guys. Peace!